Could a couple of unannounced Wii U games be making their way to Switch? During a recent Resetera thread on the upcoming Nintendo Direct, user Emily Rogers, who has an excellent track record for leaks, mentioned Nintendo has at least 2 Wii U ports in the works for 2020. This comes during a relatively quiet period of the year, where the highlight is Animal Crossing, and of course, it's impossible not to be excited by the prospect. Let it be said that the Wii U had an incredible games library. We're also lucky enough to see most of its games already appear on Nintendo Switch in one way or another. In the few years it's been on the market, we've had just about every box ticked. Improved ports of almost all major Wii U games are on there: Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and New Super Mario Bros. U, and even Breath of the Wild. And if not that, we have superior sequels like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Splatoon 2 standing in its place, enhancing what came before. On just about every front then, it's hard to be disappointed here. Even so, there are a few games which, well, simply haven't made the jump. A few stragglers that inexplicably have been stuck to exclusivity on Wii U to this day. Super Mario 3D World immediately comes to mind. It's amazing it hasn't already made an appearance, a beautifully designed 4-player Mario game combining the new Mario series multiplayer element with a 3D world layout. It also had Nintendo's Last Machine push some of its absolute best visuals. Light and shadow interplayed with each other realistically, and we had new effects like light shafts make a series debut. And so it's a pity we never got it updated for Switch. Next, well, there's the likes of Zelda Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD remasters, a Link double bill that would be a perfect fit for Switch today. Developer Tantalus's work on Twilight Princess especially is still hugely impressive, going the extra mile with upgraded textures to support the boost to 1080p on Wii U, and yet still no Switch port there. It's an easy win. Plus, if we're going third party, we've got to talk about the wonderful 101. A lesser known Platinum Games action brawler of sorts that invoked the character designs of the Beautiful Joe games on GameCube. It's missed, and we'd love to see it make the jump. Now, there's some speculation that a few of these could be coming to Switch. And really, when you think about it, there aren't many games left on the table for Nintendo to focus on here. It's about 4 or 5 major games left if you include Pikmin 3. So let's go for an in theory. What is the best case we can hope for with these remaining games on Switch if they did see a proper conversion? How might they look? Using emulators like Cemu as an example, you can get some great practical results, pushing a native 720p title like Mario 3D World to higher resolutions. In recent years, this emulator has gone from strength to strength, and today it could just give us a sample of what to expect with these games. The setup is pretty simple. Using a PC for emulation, much of the emphasis to get these games running well is on rapid CPU cores. I've typically seen 2 to 3 threads completely maxed out at 100% in fact, with games like 3D World. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The Wii U's PowerPC based CPU, after all, codenamed Espresso, ran with, well, 3 cores. With that in mind, I did find the best Cemu setting, and your mileage may vary here, to be setting it to the matching setting in the recompiler mode on the drop down menu. It may be less stable, but yes, it genuinely does get the best performance all round. It's also convenient that Switch also uses 3 CPU cores here for any eventual ports. It's a good mirror match. Equally, enabling Vulkan in the general settings menu gives a huge boon to stability all round. Be warned though that some hacks don't work with this Vulkan API, and OpenGL is a must for games like the wonderful 101. First up then, Super Mario 3D World is arguably the most requested of the bunch. It's the flagship Mario game on Wii U, and even at 720p, looks gorgeous with those bloom lighting effects and cat fur shaders on Mario's new suit. Now, for all ports, I'm aiming for a 1080p native image with a lick of anti-aliasing to demonstrate how it might look. This is how we may see these games running on Switch, seeing as in the best case scenario we've had Wii U ports already transition across at that number. That said, Nintendo has typically gone for more effective anti-aliasing methods in its games in recent years using 900p, and not to mention dynamic res scaling to help that Tegra X1 GPU cope. There are myriad ways it could be approached. So Mario 3D World running at 1080p at last. As a 60fps multiplayer game with a drawn out camera, it benefits hugely from that res boost. Flyby camera shots across the opening Super Bell Hill world show so much more detail going to the distance. Gems, trees, Goombas, all visible at range. It's worth noting that every game in the CEMU emulator has a hack section. This is where the magic happens, where users can adjust each title individually to boost the resolution, say, or upgrade shadow map quality. In the case of Mario 3D World, well, the game looks great as is, with very little tweaking over the top of a push to 1080p. Zelda Wind Waker is the next port of call. Styled with a timeless cel-shading aesthetic, the HD edition on Wii U released with upgraded lighting and a native 1080p image. So in effect, this is ready-made for Switch's maximum pixel output, no enhancements really necessary here. Looking at the HD edition running through emulation though, there are a few areas of improvement for Switch. The shadow cascade, for example, the filtering, is very close to the player, creating that obvious blur close to Link. Level of detail settings too on geometry could be pushed out even further, though again it already looks fantastic as is. Lastly, we have the point of anti-aliasing, which I've addressed in a similar way to 3D World by adding it in the hack section of the emulator. Outset Island here is a great showcase for it. Those grass tufts look pristine this way, with a few performance issues admittedly as a result. Cell shading has and always will scale very smoothly to higher resolutions owing to the lack of texture mapping, which could date it to a certain period in console technology. It looks glorious, but all round, Nintendo's work is straightforward with Wind Waker. Rolling on from Wind Waker is Twilight Princess HD. By comparison, the Wii U version is a more drastic step up over any previous release, sporting improved textures thanks to developer Tantalus's efforts, plus new effects. It's a game perfectly poised for a Switch conversion, and again, I've got CEMU running it at 1080p. Now the curious thing is we have technically seen this game running on Switch's chipset already, in a sense. Only last year I covered Nintendo's tiptoe into the Chinese market with a port of Twilight Princess to the Nvidia Shield, which bears the same Tegra X1 processor as Switch. In essence, it's the game running on Switch internals, but locked down to only the Chinese market. The twist? It's more or less only an up-resed version of the Wii edition, albeit with a new UI, and so it missed out on the visual upgrades we saw in Tantalus's HD remaster. Here's the comparison we ran back then. Both that Shield version and the Wii U remaster run at 1080p, sure, but one has a markedly improved level of polish. Since then, I've wondered, what on earth's happened to a proper port? Obviously, we do want that Wii U version, but for a prospective Switch port, it might also be nice to have an option to revert back to the original Wii style. And again, the push for 60fps would be a nice to have, though traditionally 3D Zelda titles have stuck closer to 30fps as a target, the understanding being that the animations are tied to that refresh. What we have here again though is an easy win. The work is done, and both Zelda HD ports went largely unnoticed on Wii U, so why not give them time in the sun on newer hardware? Last up is a quick look at The Wonderful 101. This game is a kind of curveball. It took a unique isometric viewpoint of action, where the more heroes you collect, the more powerful you become. It featured developer Platinum Games' trademark flair for fast, slick visuals, and ran at 60fps already back in the day. Now, it's a shame this always ran at 720p on Wii U to achieve that, but the upshot was that target 60fps was worth it. It made sense for such a game. Booting up the emulator then, we have that in theory look at a higher resolution Switch version, running at 1080p. You'll notice the emulation is far from exact, shaders have a few glitches here and there, and performance isn't exactly watertight, but the point stands. It relies on the OpenGL API to run it, and looks vastly improved running at 1080p with anti-aliasing. Texture filtering is upgraded as well, and all round, it makes it easier to pick out the individual heroes as they're collected across the map. The focus really is on Wii U today, but of course there are a few Wii games that are equally deserving of attention. Thankfully, one of the main ones is already confirmed for a return to Switch. Scheduled for this year, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition should revive one of the console's outstanding games in style, letting us break past the 480p limits of the original machine. The same goes for the likes of New Super Mario Bros. Wii, an absolute favourite of mine, and of course the double bill of Mario Galaxy games, which remains tied to the system. Again, we do have an idea of how that might look thanks to the Chinese Nvidia Shield release of these games running at 1080p here. Just a sample then of what we could expect if and when Nintendo pull the trigger. There's more to Switch than just ports, but I'd like to think there's mileage in revisiting such old classics. I'd like to know your thoughts though. Are there any Wii or Wii U favourites you'd like to see on Switch? Let me know in the comments, but in the meantime, and if you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality pristine version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.